when you wake up, how can we marry something known as sunlight anchoring? And so it's anchoring your day with sunlight on the first part of your day as consistently and reliably as possible.
Why our sleep deprivation rates are an all-time high. And what I see from just the clients that I work with is that the rates of anxiety and stress is so high, and that's definitely related. And then we also have all these electronics that we are surrounded with. And then we are exposed to blue light and light at night. People are not in touch with nature. They are not grounded. They are not getting sunlight, sun exposure, especially in the morning. I think people eat all weird times of the day that could really throw off their circadian rhythm. What are you seeing? Like, what is the reason?
Yeah. So since sleep is a skill, we really founded this to examine the intersection between technology, accountability, and behavioral change to make a difference with our sleep. So from that place, we're definitely very data driven. And so one piece of information that I think is a helpful frame for this problem or concern comes from a study in 2001 where the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, found that the average American is spending 93% of their life indoors. Now, 87%, it broke down, 87% of their life inside, a building or a structure, and another 6% of their life in automobiles. So leaving that the average person was spending around 7% of their entire life was actually spent getting outside. And that was in 2001, by the way, before there was a pandemic, before smartphones, before, just Netflix in the ways that we know it now, before laptop, all of these things that just are really designed to maintain our attention and for the most part in a kind of sedentary way of consuming these things. So from that place, if we are making the assumption that at least on average, 7% of that entire life is spent outdoors, maybe less, I would wager less at this point, then herein lies our problem, is that now we've become sort of these indoor zoo animals that are now divorced from these rhythms of nature that for thousands and thousands of years kept us on this particular schedule just automatically. And you can see these things exemplified with certain studies like the one out of University of Colorado, where they took participants that had identified themselves as night owls and kind of trouble sleepers, and they take them camping and they just take them outside into the wilderness, no other, kind of pieces of tech or ways to augment the day and stay up later with faux lights and what have you.
Dive deeper into this topic, I wanted to welcome you back. My name is Orshi McNaughton, and if you're enjoying this content, may I suggest a few things to help this channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. All that helps the algorithm so others can find us. And if you have a friend that is working on optimizing her health, please share this video with her. And now let's continue with this interview excerpt.
Within a relatively short period of time, they began to entrain and move their scheduling earlier on in the day, or so into the evening. So post sunset, right? So post sunset, shortly thereafter, their sleep onset time began to entrain to that. Even though that before they were going to bed at midnight, later, they start to move in alignment with these rhythms. So that being in touch with that nature really kind of handled a lot of this for us. That would also bring about that same framework for everything that we're talking about. You mentioned some great things like meal timing, so known as chrononutrition. So the timing of your food is going to affect your circadian rhythm. That's a cue. So all of these are known as zeitgebers, which are time givers. And so giving the body these times, and so informing the body of these times, and all of these are these clock genes. So looking at our suprachiasmatic nucleus in our brain is acting as our kind of our master clock, kind of master conductor for all of these peripheral clocks that you'll find in virtually every cell and organ in our body. And if they're getting the wrong information at the wrong time, whether that's light, which is the most important of those time givers, top, dog in this conversation. So light is paramount. Obviously, the yin to the yang of light is darkness and the timing for that. Underneath that is temperature. And so the timing of the temperature in your ambient environment, but then also things, so our behaviors and how our behaviors will impact our bodily temperature. So meaning like the food timing, the time that we eat certain foods is going to warm up our body and be a process, like a taxing process to digest and go through all that. So that's going to give a counter effect if we eat a few hours before bed and we're still digesting when we're going down to lay our head on our pillow. All these are confusing things, signals to the body, as well as exercise. We're exercising close to bedtime. And if we're looking at certain, even chronopharmacology, so timing of certain drugs that we might be taking. So for a lot of people, prescriptions or even supplements, and then of course, very common drugs being alcohol, THC, caffeine, and some of these that then also will affect that body temperature and affect the time that we're going to get sleepy, and then the quality of the sleep that we have throughout the course of the night. So those are some things that we want to really explore. And all of those are kind of going into those 7 sleep strategies that we want to really make sure we're addressing. So again, the first one being light timing, second one being darkness timing, third, temperature timing, fourth, meal timing, fifth, movement timing. That's that exercise timing piece. And then 6 is an interesting one, looking at thought timing. So there's actually gadgets on the market that will cool your prefrontal cortex, like a little headband, looking at clinical trials of the idea that people that are kind of chronic insomniacs seem to have warmer brain matter from that hyper aroused brain activity and the inability or challenge to kind of calm that prefrontal cortex. So even temperature can help with that one, but that's one that gives us more reverence for the thoughts that we're thinking. So that can behoove us to, almost take a little bit of a thought audit of the type of thoughts that we're having at around which times throughout the day and night. And then lastly is that chronopharmacology, which is drug timing. So those are some of those strategies, and happy to delve in, more on any of those.
Yeah, I would love to just go in order really briefly and maybe start with the first one. I believe what the first one was light, right?
Yep. Sure. Yeah. So let's give a quick primer on all of these. So 1, light timing. If you get nothing out of what we're talking about in this conversation, all the things that I'm saying, I hope that you are left with at least this one, that a new paradigm to shift into, versus really if you're struggling with your sleep and you're focusing on the nights, because that's what many of us do. That's what I did when I couldn't sleep. I would look at the nights and how can I fix the nights? And maybe if I meditate, maybe if I, all of these things, which is great to have a system for the nights, but there can be a new shift where we start looking at how are we living our lives from the moment we open our eyes each morning. So from that place, when you wake up, how can we marry something known as sunlight anchoring? And so it's anchoring your day with sunlight on the first part of your day as consistently and reliably as possible. So what that would look like is you wake up, and then as shortly thereafter as you can, and as aligns with the timing of the sun in your area, then you're getting yourself outside and exposing to sunlight. So this really does make you have to become a bit of a connoisseur of light and learn about this topic, because depending on where you are on the globe, northern latitude locations, certain parts of the year, certain seasons, you might need to actually stay out much longer than the average person to get the same effects, because the light might be much weaker in your area at certain parts of the year. Or if you're near the equator, you might be able to do this much faster because it's much stronger, put more powerful sun during certain times of the year, but certainly along the equator, more powerful. So with that light, you want to really have a high amplitude of light throughout the course of the day, particularly anchored on the first half. Then you want to switch over to the second one, being darkness timing, and that making the argument that many of us are kind of deprived of sufficient darkness at the right times. Because what this would look like is having very dim lighting. There's great studies out of NASA looking at this using candlelight, so very low lux output, where in the evenings you are dimming over to candlelight, red light, Himalayan salt lamps, whatever it is, it's going to be very low lux, and doing that routinely post sunset so that you are entraining yourself with these rhythms that are in your environment. And then that's helping to produce melatonin. Melatonin is known as the vampire hormone or the hormone of darkness. And it's given that name for good reason, because in order to create sufficient quantities of it, we do need the sufficient presence of darkness to get that and to signal the release of that.
Hey friends, thank you for your interest in biohacking for women. I invite you to join our free virtual event by heading over to womensbiohackingconference.com to grab your free early bird registration gifts and watch similar interviews with 20 other world-leading experts, physicians, nutritionists, and industry pioneers that discuss health optimization topics through the filter of women's health.